6. Living Gnome. In 2008, a peculiar and unsettling sighting shook the quiet town of General Guimes, Argentina. In the dead of night, around 1 a.m., Jose Alvarez and his friends were gathered, reminiscing about their last fishing trip. It was a typical night, until it wasn't. Jose casually began filming with his mobile phone, capturing the mundane banter of his friends, when an eerie noise pierced the silence. It sounded like stones being hurled from the darkness. At first, they dismissed it as an animal or perhaps a prankster. But then, from the swaying grass, something small and grotesque began to emerge. It wasn't a dog or any creature they had ever seen. It was a gnome, a twisted, unsettling figure, barely a foot tall, with a sinister grin that froze them in place. Jose's hands trembled as he continued to film, capturing the gnome's malevolent stare. Since that night, the town has been gripped by fear. More locals came forward, their stories eerily similar, describing the same gnome-like creature. The once peaceful town now lives under the shadow of an ancient terror that refuses to be explained. 5. The Devil's Footprints. The winter of 1855 brought more than just snow to the small village of Devon. It brought terror. On the night of February 9th, after a light snowfall, villagers awoke to a sight that would haunt them for generations. Hoof-like prints, impossibly precise, cut through the snow in a perfect line that stretched for over 100 miles. These weren't ordinary footprints. They defied logic, appearing on rooftops, high walls, and even crossing rivers without a break in stride. As the villagers followed the prints, dread crept in. They led through places no earthly creature could traverse, as if the maker of these prints cared not for the laws of nature. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed to have seen a dark, devilish figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Armed men scoured the countryside, desperate to find the source of this unholy trail. But their efforts were in vain. Then, in March 2009, the terror resurfaced. The same hoof-like prints appeared once more, tracing a path eerily similar to that fateful night in 1855. Devon, it seemed, was cursed to relive its darkest nightmare. 4. The Tale of Jeff. The Irving family's quiet life in their remote farmhouse was shattered in September 1931, when the walls themselves seemed to come alive. At first, it was subtle, scratches and rustling noises behind the wooden panels. They thought it was a rat, but then the sounds changed. They grew more sinister, more deliberate, until finally a voice emerged, a voice that called itself Jeff. Jeff wasn't just any creature. He was a self-proclaimed mongoose, but one like no other. Born in New Delhi in 1852, he claimed to be an extra clever mongoose, a spirit bound to this world, taking the form of a weasel. But Jeff wasn't just clever, he was cruel. His voice, though small, carried a malice that sent shivers down the spine. "I am a freak," he once said. "I have hands, and I have feet, and if you saw me, you would faint. You'd be petrified, mummified, turned into stone or a pillar of salt." Vori Irving, the daughter, claimed to have seen Jeff, a small rat-like creature with yellowish fur and a bushy tail. She insisted until her death in 2005 that Jeff was real, a haunting presence that would never truly leave. 3. The Vanishing of James Worson. On September 3, 1873, James Worson, a man of pride and bravado, accepted a challenge that would lead him into the annals of unsolved mysteries. He boasted he could run from Leamington to Coventry, a 20-mile trek, in record time. His friends, Hammerson Burns and Barham Wise, followed him in a horse-drawn carriage, documenting the event. Worson was in high spirits, exchanging words with his friends as he ran. But then, without warning, something unimaginable happened. As Worson sprinted down the road, he stumbled. There was a terrible, piercing scream, a sound that would haunt Burns and Wise forever. In that moment, Worson didn't just fall, he vanished. The ground where he should have landed was undisturbed, save for his footprints, which ended abruptly as if he had been swallowed by the air itself. Panic ensued. A search was called, but even the bloodhounds refused to approach the spot where Worson disappeared. He was never seen or heard from again, leaving only questions and a deep, abiding fear that something beyond understanding had taken him. 2. The Cry for Help. August 7, 1973, began like any other day in New Mexico, but it soon spiraled into a nightmare. Several CB radio users picked up a distress call from a boy who called himself Larry. His voice, trembling and weak, told a story of horror. Trapped in a red and white pickup truck with his father, who had suffered a heart attack, Larry was stranded in a ravine, unable to escape. His pleas for help echoed across states, from California to Wyoming, and even as far as Canada. But as rescue teams scrambled to locate him, something strange happened. The boy's voice began to fade, and when it returned, he called himself David, not Larry. The confusion only deepened as time passed, with multiple people claiming to hear the boy, but all attempts to trace the signal failed. As the days wore on, hope dwindled. The authorities eventually called off the search, dismissing it as a hoax. But those who heard Larry's cries knew better. His voice, filled with desperation, was too real, too raw to be anything but genuine. Yet the boy was never found, leaving behind a haunting question. Was it a cry for help, or the last echo of a soul lost to the wilderness? 1. The Isdal Woman. On November 29, 1970, a gruesome discovery was made in the remote Isdalen Valley of Norway. The charred remains of a young woman were found, surrounded by empty bottles of gasoline and a disturbingly large quantity of sleeping pills. Her identity was a mystery. Her fingerprints had been sanded off, and the tags on her clothing were meticulously removed. The investigation uncovered more questions than answers. The woman had traveled across Europe under 9 different names, her movements recorded in cryptic notes found in her luggage. Witnesses described her as elegant, always requiring a room with a balcony, and speaking several languages fluently. But the most chilling account came from a local man who encountered her 5 days before her body was found. He described a woman dressed inappropriately for the rugged terrain, her face twisted in fear, and followed by 2 large men in black coats. For 32 years, the man kept his story to himself, until he finally came forward. When he did, the police response was as cold as the valley itself. "Forget her," they said. She was dispatched. The Isdal woman's death remains one of Norway's most perplexing cold cases, a story where every answer seems to lead to another question. These 6 tales are not just stories. They are reminders that the world is filled with mysteries that defy explanation. And sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what we see, but what we don't.